Hi, my name is Barry Stephenson. I'm a bass player based in New York City, and this is my second installment of my Working Bass series for Sanaa Online. So one of the most important components of being a working bass player is playing in two. Now, what do I mean by playing in two? For those who don't know, playing in two is where you play two half notes to the bar in a bar of 4/4 music. So if the beat is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, playing in two sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? That's a two feel. Now applying that to music would be, for most of the examples today, we're going to apply everything over a blues because that's one of the easiest vehicles to demonstrate and work on concepts when we're learning a new thing. So a two beat on a blues is going to sound something like this. And that's a simple version of it, right? With not much rhythm, just nice half notes. And add a little 4 in there, but we'll get to that later. So an important concept with playing in two is the note you're playing and where the direction of the line is going. So for example, in this case, we're playing an F blues. One way to first start working on playing in two is simply just playing the roots. So I would start out with playing all your Fs, right? Finding where they are in one position, so on and so forth. Then I might go and do roots fifths, right, for each chord. So I might go maybe a little chromaticism. So you might actually start on the thirds and the fifths versus the root. That's like the third level of this, right? So you might say, now playing in two can be applied to multiple genres of music, whether it be Brazilian bossa nova, jazz, early jazz, country, funk, soul. Like there's always an element of playing in two, right? So to me, two is also a very important element for dancing. Like a lot of the old ballroom dances, you're thinking of people going. Or if you're thinking of like, say like a country two beat, you can go. Or if you're thinking of a bossa two beat. Or I was thinking of samba. A lot of music is based on a two beat. So understanding how you manipulate the note length, as we talked about in our last video, and how you function in terms of moving in between the notes and the chords, the fills, if you were, that to me is kind of what dictates each style. So if I'm playing in like a New Orleans two beat fill, let's say if I want to go for B flat blues now. Or if you're playing a country two beat, now what's funny is it's very, very similar. So I might go. thing about 2 is it's all about sitting in the pocket with whoever your drummer is or percussion. So here's an example of playing in 2 over an F blues in a kind of more basic, not so active manner. 1, 2, 3, 4. A little busier now. Remember those thirds? So when you're playing in 4, it should have the same danceability of the 2 feel, but a little bit more momentum while still staying in the pocket. And something that helps me is imagining if the 2 and 4 were there, like 1, 2, if it were there, and how you would play with that there, but taking away that 2 and 4, so you just get quarter note pulse, right? You want to make your notes as long as possible, with a little emphasis on 2 and 4. I know some people over-exaggerate when they're first learning just to get the feel of it, but you don't want it to be popping out too much. You just want a little lilt, as they call it, on the 2 and 4. So when playing in 4, once again, we're going to do this over an F blues. And when you're playing in 4, there's a couple of different approaches to how to create bass lines. Now, level 1 is just knowing all the roots, right? So 4 roots to a bar of like 1, 2, 3, right? So on and so forth. Then the next level of that would be doing something like triads, right? Like so triads. Then you can start mixing around playing scalar bass lines. So that was a chordal approach, and now this is more of a scalar approach, right? So if you were to say like mix a little chordal up with it. And that's a little rhythm. And then from scalar and chordal bass tones, you start to figure out where you can add chromaticism to your bass lines, right? So one simple one is and you typically want your chord tones to arrive on beats 1 and 3, but definitely a chord tone at the top of the beat if possible, like majority of the time, unless the line is dictating something, like you have a melodic contour that you're playing, like something like. Right there, I started on the 9 as opposed to the root at the top of the chorus. But obviously transcribing great bass lines by people like Ray Brown, Paul Chambers, Ron Carter, I mean, the list goes on and on, the master bass line creators. That's going to give you information on how to kind of understand how to begin to navigate chord tones and different bass lines, and when to use chromaticism, when to use pedal points, when to play the root, when not to, how to use drops and rhythmic things. But now I'm going to give you an example of me playing in 4 with the track to kind of explain what I mean by chordal scalar using chromaticism and adding rhythm to walking bass lines. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now that we kind of have a basic understanding of 2 versus 4, now let's kind of figure out how to play the 4 in the 2 and how to switch between the two. Because I've noticed that when I see younger bass players playing between 2 and 4, sometimes the momentum might get lost between the 2 and the 4. That's a very, very hard thing, to make the 2 have the same drive as the 4, but make the 4 feel as laid back as the 2 without rushing, right? So here's an example of playing in 2, and then I'll mix up a little bit of 4 in it, and then I'll go to 4. And then I'll go, after I go to 4 for a little while, I'll go back to 2 to demonstrate how it should still have the same momentum in it. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. So now I would like to talk about pedal points, or pedals, simply put. Pedals are where you sustain one note over the duration of a sequence of chord changes, or even if it's a static chord, you might play one note to create a bit of tension before you stop pedaling, which creates this gigantic release, which makes the music, like, pedals are used mainly to build suspense. So a couple of songs that are employ a great use of the pedal, something like Walkin' by Miles Davis, or Milestones, the new Milestones as it's called. They have a section where it's over a pedal. Sita's Song Flute by John Coltrane is based on a series of pedals. And countless other standards, but the pedal is supposed to create suspense and a bit of tension before resolving it into the chord tone. Now usually, and this is not always, but a good place to start pedaling is the 5 of whatever key you're in. Usually the 5 is going to be a good pedal. And sometimes, depending on the song, it could be the tritone. Sometimes you could just pedal the 1. It all depends on what the chord changes are. And so what's interesting is when you play a pedal, the chordal instrument, whether it's the piano or the guitar, can play the existing harmony over the pedal, or they can choose to kind of use the pedal and create new harmonic possibilities depending on what the pedal is. So now I'm going to give you an example of using pedal points over a blues. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we're going to talk about a concept that's usually referred to as broken time, right? That's more of in a quote unquote modern tradition of playing, is where you're not necessarily playing 4 to a bar or 2 to a bar like we did in previous examples, or even necessarily on all the downbeats. It's like a little bit looser, more of a modern kind of approach to accompanying. And we're going to do it on the F blues just like we've been doing, just to kind of create some continuity in our approach to how we work on different concepts. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we've talked about playing in 2, we've talked about playing in 4, mixing the 2 up. We've also talked about playing pedals or pedal points. We've talked about playing with a broken or open, loose kind of time feel. Another thing that's quintessential that you're going to have to be able to do as a working bass player is play up-tempo swing. If you're a working jazz bass player, up-tempo swing is going to come in. It's going to happen. And as a bass player, you will be expected to play for 9 to 12 minutes up-tempo the entire time, playing quarter notes. So you have to figure out ways, using some of those other examples that we studied previous, like when to switch to 2 or when to stay in 2 on up-tempo, when to use pedal point, not only to create tension, but to give yourself a break as a bass player. And also when to use broken time to kind of change the feel and also not necessarily have to play all the way through. Unless that's the name of the vibe, then if that's the name of the gig, then that's what you got to do. But now I'll give you an example of playing up tempo over a blues. And one thing to think about when you're playing up tempo is you have to breathe so you can relax, so you can focus. That's what my classical bass teacher, Melanie Punter, shout out to Miss Punter, she would always say, she calls it the Bruff method. You have to breathe so you can relax, so you can focus on the music you're playing. Because if you're all tense, the tenseness will come through when you're playing, and then your arms get stiff, and then it becomes impossible to play. But if you relax, then you can if you breathe and then relax, you can also realize, like, oh, playing up tempo is like almost like playing eighth notes down below. So if you change your approach, some people do the one finger thing the whole time. I can't do that all night. That's, more power to those people. I employ a 2-finger technique, and you try to play with a lighter approach than if you're playing right here. There's a certain weight to the note you can get down here versus if you're going. You have to kind of get off the string a little sooner than if you can kind of dig in a little bit more at a lower tempo. So here's an example of up-tempo swing. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. on from playing fast, now let's go to the exact opposite end of the spectrum, playing ballads. Now, quiet as it's kept, playing ballads is really the thing that'll kind of separate you, the professionals, from the amateurs, because ballads take a lot of time, patience, and taste, if you will. The most important elements of playing a ballad, I would say, are playing long notes, long, beautiful, sustained notes, making sure your note choice is extremely important. So you really want to stick to your roots and your chord tones on this one. Also, when to play, how to move, whether it's like a triplet kind of feel versus like a straight eighth feel. There's a lot of controversy between that, so I'll let you listen to how you love, your favorite bass players and what they love to do, and let you figure that out. But I would say there's a lot of different approaches to playing a ballad, and the first one is always playing as simple and just beautiful long notes in time. That one will never go stale. And then from there, you also get ballads where what's called a walking ballad, where you're still playing a slow tempo, but it has a little bit more of a pulse under it. You might actually walk, or it could still be in two in a walking ballad, but just have a little bit more momentum. So we're going to do an example of playing just a regular bare bones ballad, and then we'll also do a walking ballad. And the tune I'll do is I Can't Get Started, which is just basically a 1-6-2-5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Now here's an example of a walking ballad. So we've talked about several tools that your modern day jazz bass player has to have in their arsenal in order to get called for gigs, right? We didn't talk about different styles or eras within that, like from, early jazz to swing to bebop, hard bop, soul jazz, avant-garde, modal. I mean, there's so many styles and variations that depending on what you're trying to do artistically, you would need to understand in order to work in that field. There's also stuff that came after it that I feel like any working bass player's arsenal should be, stocked with these items, like being able to play different bossa nova and samba grooves, and playing different Latin styles like son and guajira and guaguancó and cha-cha and all these different styles. The list is vast and goes on so long. It could take its own video to create just a conversation about all the different styles and how to approach them on a double bass or just as a bass player in general. But some things that we didn't mention, but I want to make sure we take note of, are the things that don't require any talent at all for you to do. And that's basically what it really takes to be a professional in this business. The first things you got to get out of the way is you have to be on time. You have to check out the music in advance and learn the music when it's sent to you, and be a good person to be around on the bandstand. Be in a good spirit. Be professional. You're not there to kiss anybody's behind, but you can be pleasant and easy to work with. And I guarantee you, if you keep those things in mind and take care of business on your instrument, then all the gigs will come to you.